70 miles south of Denver, the Front Range drops out of the Rockies and flattens into the high plains at 6,000 feet above sea level. That elevation is not a backdrop, it is the race condition. Everything that happens at the Colorado Springs Spartan Ultrafecta Weekend, every climb, every obstacle, every decision you make about hydration and pacing happens at altitude. That is the baseline. If you're planning to run this race this week, that is where the conversation starts. Colorado Springs sits at the edge of what geologists call the Front Range Urban Corridor, the transition zone between the high plains to the east and the Rocky Mountain front to the west. Pikes Peak at 14,000 feet defines the western skyline. The city itself of Colorado Springs sits at roughly 6,000 feet. That 12-mile vertical gap between the summit and the valley floor is the product of a tectonic event that began 55 million years ago when subducting plates drove beneath the North American plate and forced the Rockies upward. The landscape you are racing on, though, is not incidental. It is the result of one of the most significant geological episodes in the continent's history. Humans have been in this corridor since the end of the last ice age, approximately 11,700 years ago. The topography that made it hospitable for the first inhabitants is the same topography that makes it one of the most distinctive venues on the Spartan calendar every year. If you're flying, you have two airport options. Colorado Springs has a municipal airport, COS, with connecting service, and it's viable if you're coming in from the western U.S. The other option is Denver International, one of the largest airports in the country, just 75 miles north. If you fly into Denver, factor in the drive. It's manageable, but it can be variable. And book your car rental early. Cars sell out. Book flights and rental cars as soon as the race is posted and give yourself time on the front end. Hotels in Colorado Springs are plentiful, and the race site is only 15 minutes from downtown. There's no logistical reason to scramble on that if you plan ahead. Altitude, the real conversation. Here is what the research says and what my experience confirms. Individual response to altitude is highly personal. If you're physically fit, well hydrated, and not arriving the morning of the race, you can manage it. The literature says full acclimatization takes 3 to 5 days, sometimes up to 3 weeks. Most of us don't have 3 weeks, but what you can do is arrive early, get modified sessions in at altitude before race day, stay aggressively ahead of your hydration, and eliminate anything from your diet days prior to the race that is going to work against you. In 2024, I drove up to Pikes Peak at 15,000 feet on Thursday night and did a brisk walk at the summit. It was uncomfortable, but it wasn't disabling. What I did was make 6,000 feet feel manageable when I came back down. On Friday, the day before the first race, I ran a session at the Garden of Gods at 4,000 feet. By Saturday, I had established a reference point. That is not altitude training. It's just reconnaissance, knowing what the altitude does to your system before the gun goes off. So if you're coming in from sea level, this race will test you. That is not a warning to avoid it. It's information to work with. The race is held at Fort Carson, an active Army garrison home to the 4th Infantry Division and the 10th Special Forces Group. As a civilian, access to this installation is not something you take for granted. The base was originally established as Camp Carson in 1942, named after the explorer Kit Carson as part of the World War II mobilization effort. Over 100,000 soldiers trained at Camp Carson during the war. Over 9,000 prisoners of war were held here, working in the camp and in surrounding logging operations. The garrison became a fort in 1954 with the transition to mechanized vehicles. When you race at Camp Carson, you are running terrain where people have trained for actual combat. That context matters. The military presence at the race is genuine. The Honor Series designation means something here. When you see National Guard, Special Forces, and veterans organizations in the festival area, you are not looking at branding. You're looking at the community the race is embedded in. Early on race day runs through a checkpoint on Wilderness Road. You don't need an ID. There's no search. Army personnel at the checkpoint are professional and accommodating. Parking is in a large field in front of registration. The logistics at this site are clean. All courses are set inside of a topographical bowl. Hills to the north and south, long gradual climbs and descents on connecting trails. Individual climbs top out at about 600 feet, but there are 9 of them during the beast, at incremental elevation. There's some pitching to about 35% grade, but the total elevation on the gain on the beast runs only 2,000 feet. The Ultra doubles that with a 2-mile loop run twice. The additional carries and barbed wire crawl, pushing total gain to about 4,500 feet. One thing to understand, there's no tree cover on this course, none. That changes the heat calculus completely. In 2024, temperatures were in the mid-80s by 9 in the morning with full sun exposure for the duration. That combination, altitude plus heat plus zero shade, is the defining challenge of this race. A water backpack or a water belt is not optional. Sun protection, spray, heat covering, neck, sunglasses is also a good idea. Hydration strategy needs you to be established before you arrive and maintained through race day. In 2024, the obstacles were evenly distributed, and I expect nothing less this year. The dunk wall came early, and Hercois closed the race. Overhead obstacles were scattered rather than clustered in a final gauntlet. Spear throw and rope climb came later in the course. The weekend was dry throughout, so the only real slip factor was the slip wall immediately following dunk wall. Spartan has not published the obstacles for this race. In fact, they published the wrong course this year. 2025 is still listed, but I'm assuming it won't change that much from previous years. The Honor Series was said to be expanding this year, and this is the 3rd Honor Series race. The military liaison for Spartan, Chad Conley, a former Green Beret, indicated to me earlier in the season that the goal is 10 Honor Series venues for the year. They've solicited feedback via Discord, and this is a rare case where the community has had a direct line into how a race series evolves. If the Colorado Springs race is on your schedule, pay attention to how an Honor Series develops across the calendar this year. I'm expecting it to be substantially different this year. In closing, Colorado Springs in 2026 is a legitimate target for any serious racer willing to do the prep. The altitude is manageable. The venue is historically significant. The course is demanding without being arbitrarily about it. If you can get there a couple of days early, get your session in at elevation, and respect what 6,000 feet does to your body, then you have a legitimate shot at a strong race. I hope to see you out there. It's going to be fun.